a career woman with a perfect life who does not realize she has been cursed. The film begins by showing the warm atmosphere of a birthday party for a young girl named Rosario, who is affectionately called Rosa, the only child in her family. At the age of 10, her small family holds a fairly lively celebration, inviting neighbors and Rosa's school friends. At first glance, everything seems perfect, as the four of them live together in one house. Rosa, her father Oscar, her mother Elena, and her grandmother Griselda. However, behind that happiness lies a painful reality that not everyone notices, as Elena is seen enduring the pain caused by her illness. In the middle of the lively party, Rosa appears gloomy and does not truly enjoy the moment. Her father, noticing this, tries to comfort her with great affection and even promises that all of Rosa's wishes will one day come true. Those words are not just empty reassurance, but a sincere promise from a father to his beloved daughter. Hearing that, Rosa slowly smiles again, holding on to the hope that the promise will eventually become reality. Not long after, Rosa begins to realize that her grandmother has been missing for quite some time, so she decides to look for her in the bedroom. However, when she enters the room, Rosa is shocked by the unusual condition. She sees many crawling creatures around the room and notices bloodstains on one of her grandmother's clothes. Confused, she continues searching, unaware that her grandmother has just quietly come out of a wardrobe as if she had been hiding there without Rosa noticing. The situation becomes even stranger when her grandmother suddenly appears in the room even though she was not there before. What worries Rosa even more is when she notices blood on her grandmother's hands, but instead of explaining, her grandmother becomes angry and tells Rosa to leave the room immediately. As the event reaches the closing prayer, everyone gathers together, but Rosa's attention remains fixed on her grandmother, who keeps staring sharply at her. That gaze gives the impression that there is something being hidden, something Rosa does not yet understand. As time passes, Rosa's life changes drastically when she grows into adulthood, and all the dreams she once had finally come true. She becomes a successful career woman, working at a large company in America with a high salary and even holding an important position, making her life look perfect, as if everything always goes her way. However, behind all those achievements, her personal life is far from perfect, as her family has long been broken, her parents divorced, her mother passed away, and her relationship with her father is no longer close. Her busy career gradually distances her from her family until she rarely returns home and was not even there during her mother's final moments. Now she lives alone in the city, enjoying the results of her hard work by herself, with no one truly by her side. Until one day, in the middle of a severe snowstorm that paralyzes the city and forces everyone to stay indoors, Rosa receives a phone call. The call is not from her grandmother, but from the apartment management, informing her that Griselda, Rosa's grandmother, has died in an accident and asking Rosa to come and take care of the body. Without wasting any time, Rosa immediately decides to go to her grandmother's apartment in another city, which is not too far, but still takes time due to the extreme weather conditions. From that conversation, it is revealed that they have been living their own separate lives, with her grandmother living alone in the apartment without anyone to accompany her, her mother Elena having passed away, and her father living his own life as well. Their relationship has become distant due to the lack of communication, limited to occasional phone calls, and since Rosa became busy with her career, she has rarely visited her grandmother. During the trip, Rosa contacts her father to inform him about the sad news, and they plan to meet at her grandmother's apartment, but her father instead asks her not to come and insists that he will handle everything himself. Even so, Rosa feels that she has made many mistakes toward her grandmother, and that guilt grows stronger, making her determined to go anyway, because even if it is already too late, at least this is her last chance to show her devotion to her grandmother. Rosa finally heads to her grandmother's apartment by train. During the journey, she opens her phone and finds an old voice message from her grandmother that she had never listened to before. Out of curiosity, she plays it, but immediately falls silent when she hears her grandmother's weak voice apologizing to her. At the same time, when she casually glances behind her, Rosa thinks she sees someone in the middle of the crowd, and that figure turns out to be Elena, her own mother. She pauses, trying to make sense of what she just saw, but within seconds, the figure disappears, leaving Rosa unsure whether it was real or just her imagination. Long story short, Rosa arrives at the apartment where her grandmother used to live, an old building that looks worn down and is mostly occupied by elderly residents. There, she is greeted by Marty, a building caretaker who then leads her to her grandmother's unit.
Condolences. I'm Marty. I guess I better take you to her then. You came here? Where you been?
Was she ill?
I don't know.
My mom passed away a few years ago. My dad's driving from Atlantic City.
Marty does not really know what happened. He only found Rosa's grandmother already lifeless and assumes that she died from a fall. As Rosa steps into the room, she immediately feels an uncomfortable atmosphere. The space is damp, stuffy, and messy, as if it has not been taken care of for a long time. The management has already contacted an ambulance, which is expected to arrive soon. After showing Rosa the room, Marty leaves her alone inside. Standing in front of her grandmother's body covered with a sheet, Rosa is overwhelmed with guilt, feeling deeply remorseful because she has been too busy with her career and neglected her grandmother, who had been living alone and clearly needed her presence. However, when she lifts the sheet, Rosa is shocked by her grandmother's face, which looks disturbing with her eyes wide open. Not only that, but on several parts of her body, Rosa notices many strange cuts and marks forming unfamiliar symbols. The situation becomes even more heartbreaking when Rosa sees the kitchen filled with rotten food, indicating that her grandmother had been living in very poor conditions for quite some time. At the same moment, she hears the sound of an ambulance arriving, prompting her to open the window and wave her hand to signal them, but strangely, the ambulance just drives away. Confused, Rosa calls for help, but she is told to wait because the extreme snowstorm has made the situation outside dangerous, with many victims needing urgent attention. With no other choice, Rosa has to wait longer and remain inside the apartment with her grandmother's body. While waiting, she looks around around the room, but the atmosphere feels increasingly strange and unsettling. Suddenly, she is startled by a noise behind her, and when she turns toward her grandmother's body, she sees something moving inside her nose. Moments later, a worm crawls out, shocking and disgusting Rosa at the same time. Reluctantly, she tries to pick it up using a cloth, but suddenly, a wound appears on the palm of her hand, and the worm quickly crawls into it. Even worse, moments later, the worm comes out again through her ear, leaving Rosa in panic and completely confused about what is happening. Before she can calm herself, she hears knocking coming from behind a wardrobe.
What the hell?
When she opens it, she finds a goat's head inside, and behind the pile, there is a hidden door that is locked. However, before she can investigate further, she hears someone knocking on the apartment door. Rosa opens it and finds a man who introduces himself as her neighbor, named Joe. He comes to retrieve an electric pan that he had previously lent to Rosa's grandmother. But because Joe seems a bit forceful in trying to enter, Rosa firmly refuses and shuts the door, promising that she will look for the item and return it later. After that, her curiosity grows even stronger about the strange events she has just experienced. She examines her grandmother's body again and realizes that the strange symbols almost cover her entire body. She also finds a barbed chain wrapped around one of her grandmother's legs, with a small key hanging from it. The key immediately reminds her of the hidden door she discovered earlier. When she tries it, the key fits perfectly and unlocks the door, revealing a hidden room beneath it. The room is filled with animal bones and various strange objects, resembling a place used for ritual practices. Inside the hidden room, Rosa finds a strange doll-like object, and beneath it is a name written Kobayende. But that is not the most shocking part, because on the ritual altar, Rosa discovers something far more disturbing, a photo of herself as a child, along with strands of her hair and even her teeth. This discovery makes Rosa start thinking negatively, feeling that everything there is directly connected to her. At the same time, the atmosphere inside the apartment slowly becomes more terrifying, filling Rosa with an overwhelming sense of fear she can no longer contain. Without thinking twice, she immediately leaves the apartment, only leaving behind a note so that if the ambulance arrives, they can take her grandmother's body right away. Outside, the snowstorm is still raging, but Rosa forces herself to leave because she feels safer outside than staying in that apartment. However, that decision leads her into an even worse situation, as outside she begins to see disturbing apparitions appearing one by one, slowly approaching her. With no other choice, Rosa is forced to go back into her grandmother's apartment. Inside, she tries to find an explanation for everything that has happened, and her search eventually leads her to information about the symbols, the doll, and the ritual she discovered, which brings her to a belief system known as Palo. From there, she learns that Palo is a dark spiritual practice, originating from a mix of African traditions and Latin American Catholicism, and its followers are known as Paleros. Rosa then remembers that her grandmother had once been involved in such practices, but only now does she realize that they involve rituals connected to dark forces. From her research, she learns that these practices involve sacrifices and the use of a special iron vessel as a medium for making a pact, which looks exactly like the object she found in the hidden room. The vessel is believed to bind an agreement that can bring either fortune or a curse, and anyone who is tied to it cannot easily escape. From that point on, Rosa begins to realize that the strange events happening to her are not a coincidence, but something connected to the ritual her grandmother once performed. She immediately calls her father, who is still on his way, and tells him everything she has discovered, including her belief that she has become a victim of something tied to her grandmother's past. Rosa even starts to assume that her grandmother holds a grudge against her because she chose to go with her father after the divorce and was not there during her mother's final moments. However, in the middle of her confusion and fear, Rosa decides not to run away anymore, but instead to find a way to stop all of this. She returns to the hidden room and tries to bring the iron vessel out, although it is not easy, as it is heavy and she is constantly disturbed by terrifying figures that begin to appear. After struggling, Rosa finally manages to take the object out, and at the same time she finds a hidden book that contains instructions for performing rituals.
Blood of the Palero who placed the curse.
The blood of the accursed.
From the book, she learns that to break a bond, the blood of those involved must be combined inside the vessel. With hesitation, Rosa follows the instructions and mixes her own blood with her grandmother's, hoping that this will stop everything that is happening. However, after waiting for a while, nothing happens, until suddenly she is startled again by the appearance of a figure that tries to attack her. At the same time, Joe, her neighbor, comes back and knocks on the door after hearing the commotion inside. From their brief conversation, Joe unintentionally reveals something that makes Rosa realize the truth, that her grandmother never hated her, but actually loved her deeply. Joe even often heard Rosa's grandmother praying every night, asking that all of Rosa's wishes would come true. From that moment, Rosa begins to understand that what has been happening is not a curse, but part of a pact meant to fulfill her desires.
Your grandma, she loved you. She was proud of you. Prayed day and night for your dreams to come true.
Not long after, Rosa finds a note explaining the entity named Kobayende. From that note, she slowly comes to understand that Kobayende is an entity involved in the pact, one that will come once all the conditions are fulfilled to claim its payment for what has been given. After learning all of that, Rosa begins to feel that everything she has achieved is meaningless because her success is not entirely the result of her own efforts, but part of a dark pact that demands a price. She reopens the ritual book and discovers that the agreement can actually be undone, but only if the one who made the pact sacrifices themselves by pouring their blood into the ritual vessel. The problem is, her grandmother, who she believed made the pact, is already dead. Even so, Rosa tries to find another way until she comes up with an idea to lure the entity back into her grandmother's body. She begins performing the ritual by pouring her grandmother's blood into the iron vessel, mixing it with strands of her grandmother's hair, and reciting the incantations written in the book in hopes of summoning the entity. Not long after, something begins to happen, as the entity slowly emerges from her grandmother's body before suddenly attacking Rosa and knocking her unconscious. When she wakes up, the atmosphere around her feels different, and she's shocked to see her mother standing there as if she's come back to life. Overwhelmed with emotion, Rosa apologizes for everything that happened in the past, especially for choosing to leave and not being there during her mother's final moments. However, she slowly realizes that the figure is not her mother, but the entity trying to deceive her by taking the form of the person she misses the most.
I'm so proud of you.
It's really you, Mom.
I hid while you died.
I understand.
I'm sorry that I ever did.
Now close your eyes.
Rosa fights back and, with the help of the incantations, manages to force the entity back into her grandmother's body, and this time she succeeds.
Espíritus del Ganga. Espíritu del Ganga. Protégenos. Ofrezco saco.
The next morning, her father arrives and finds Rosa in a weakened state inside the apartment. Her father appears as if he knows nothing about the pact and only understands that her grandmother had been involved in practices considered part of their family tradition. After that, her grandmother's body is taken away, and the situation gradually returns to normal, as if everything has come to an end. Rosa tries to move on by cleaning the apartment while her father is in the kitchen. However, when she looks at an old photo, she notices something strange. There are traces of blood on her father's hands. Suspicion grows, and she immediately goes to look for him, eventually finding him inside the hidden room. That is when the truth is finally revealed. The one who made the pact with the entity was not her grandmother, but her father. He did it to fulfill his promise to make Rosa happy after his divorce from Elena, and to ensure that all of Rosa's dreams would come true. Her grandmother, knowing what he had done, chose to take on the consequences herself, sacrificing herself so that Rosa and her father would not suffer the direct impact. All this time, her grandmother had been holding the entity back and feeding it with her own blood to keep it under control. But after her grandmother died, that balance was lost, and Rosa became the next target. Realizing his mistake, her father decides to atone by sacrificing himself in place of Rosa. However, instead of ending, the situation becomes even worse as the entity grows more aggressive, takes over her father's body, and begins attacking Rosa. A violent struggle ensues. Just as Rosa is nearly powerless, Joe arrives to help, but tragically he becomes a victim in the process. In a desperate situation, Rosa makes a final decision and attacks her father, causing him to fall into the ritual vessel and ultimately die. Several months later, Rosa's life appears to return to normal, and her career continues to rise. However, behind all of that lies a far more terrifying truth. The entity never truly left. It has now become a part of Rosa herself, proving that no one can ever truly escape the pact once it has been made, and that is where the story ends.